Hi guys, last year I was in the USA to investigate the UFO phenomenon. This book that I have in my hands was written by one of the greatest researchers in the history of the UFO phenomenon and the human mind, Dennis Stillings. I want to publicly thank Isabella Ranth because thanks to her and her good references about me, Stillings accepted that I go to Valley City and interview him. I can say today, as long as I live, I will never forget the first time I saw Dennis Stillings. I cannot explain the feeling of meeting one of the researchers you admire the most and who is also a legend of ufology. So, Dennis, thank you very much. Thank you for opening the doors of your house for this interview. Thank you, Dennis, for your time. Thank you for the contact of Jim Kubelbeck, of whom I will publish 2 interviews in a couple of weeks. Thank you for your hospitality. Thank you, Dennis, for your closeness. And also thank you to your wife. I hope for the rest you are seeing me. You will enjoy and learn as much I do from this interview that I have not edited or modified in a single second. Thank you very much. Queridos seguidores de Misterios Universales, de mi canal Artur Oms en YouTube, vais a ver algo inédito. Una entrevista a Dennis Stillings, uno de los mayores investigadores del fenómeno ovni y todo aquello que está relacionado con el imaginario del contacto ovni en la mente humana. Este libro lo escribió Dennis Stillings y gracias a Isabella Herranz pude viajar a Norteamérica, pude viajar a Valley City y entrevistar al gran Dennis Stillings. No os puedo transmitir la emoción que sentí cuando vi bajar de su ranchera a Dennis Stillings. Encontrarte con uno de los ufólogos que admiras más es una sensación simple y llanamente indescriptible. Espero, amigos, que este esfuerzo que vais a hacer de escuchar esta entrevista en inglés os ayude, en primer lugar, para que os lo paséis bien y, en segundo lugar, para que aprendáis tanto o más que yo. Muchas gracias. We are in North Dakota with Dennis Stillings. Dennis, thank you for accepting my visit here in the USA.
You're welcome.
It's a great honor to be with you. It seems incredible for me to be with you after having read your book thousands of kilometers away from here. Dennis, you was the founder of Archaeos. You was a writer of biological studies of the imaginal component in the UFO contact experience. Today we are the 23 November of 2021. A long time has passed from these books and these studies, but almost in UFO nothing has changed. Is it true?
Nothing that I've seen. The UFOs have not landed on the White House lawn yet or even come close. The same old optical illusions are trotted out. You really have to think that it has nothing to do with extraterrestrials. It has to do with the country's mood, maybe.
So, Dennis, because sure there are a lot of people who are looking this interview, young people also, and they don't know who is Dennis Stillings. Who is Dennis Stillings?
Well, he's a really old guy, retired out in the plains of North Dakota, far away from most of the problems of the world. And, excuse me, I spent my life working, I worked for Medtronic, it was a medical company, and then from there I developed the Bakken Library and Museum in Minneapolis. It's on Lake Calhoun, and it has about everything in terms of electricity and its use with medical purposes and research. And after that, just started Archaeus Project, and Archaeus Project was a organization of some top people from around the Twin Cities in medicine and physics and engineering and so forth. And we had a sort of round table, started out as a round table to kick around ideas of, well, this, I should say that this was taking place in the time of the concerns about medical costs, and was there ways that could be implemented to reduce those costs. And so I was given kind of carte blanche to go around the world and go to various places and look at what was being done, come back and report. We had the newsletter. We brought people in to lecture about once a month. Tried to pick somebody who could do a good presentation of. It didn't make any difference how over the top the material was, as long as he did a good job. And we listened to all those things, and we had some conferences, and there are some things that have come out of that. This is some time ago now. After that, I went to Hawaii, and most of my time was spent working with a hospital, looking at holistic approaches to medicine, health and medicine. And then after that, I moved to North Dakota, and there's not much to do up here except go hunting or fishing or overland skiing, I suppose.
This is very interesting, hunting and fishing. Dennis, you mentioned Archaeus. Archaeus, it is a very interesting review project, and Archaeus searched for the relationship between the body and the consciousness. Does consciousness need a physical body, or can it exist by itself?
Well, Archaeus looked at the interaction between mind and body to see if various practices you'd call mental practices, I guess, could help in the healing process. The metaphysical question about consciousness existing independent of the body, well, There's a couple hundred libraries of books and papers on the subject, and nothing has come of it. Still don't know what consciousness is. You can say that there's nothing but consciousness. Everything is, without consciousness there wouldn't be anything. So consciousness is what gives the world its form and its movement and all those aspects. Whether it is in some sense independent of the body or can be, it's a problem that hasn't been cracked yet. I suppose you're thinking, is there survival of bodily death, as they say? There's libraries of intriguing anecdotes and stuff on the subject. You can find a great deal of material. But I don't know. I think a person can have their own answer to that without any problem, not worry about anybody else's.
So, Dennis, we live in a strange world. How do you see the collective psychological health of our society today? We are in a healthy form or not?
We're in a period of tremendous transition. The world is, well, it isn't here. Here it's right side up, but it looks like an awful lot of it is upside down. Some of the worst elements of society are free to work their damage in high positions, and people seem to be unable to put a stop to it. I mean, I'm old enough that some of the ideas that you see coming out, especially from the colleges and universities, would have seriously gotten you put away for your own good. If you go back, 60 years or so, it's fumbling around. I mean, it's probably can be summed up as a lot of people trying to construct a religion for themselves, trying to discover something that is bigger than their own egos and their daddy's pocketbook. I don't know what. It's been said that when you have these periods of transitions, there's hell to pay. So I'm not sure if we're seeing anything like the worst of it. But you see good signs and you see bad signs. This extreme polarization, a kind of, to use metaphors, it's kind of like when you get to this level of polarization that we're seeing in society, you're starting to tear apart the fabric of the universe, so to speak. And when you do that, monsters start coming in from the other side. And I don't know where that is headed. You see more archetypal manifestations. The culture begins to produce spontaneous fairy tales. You see this fairy tale atmosphere every day in the papers. There I don't know what, 1,500 genders. There's we're going to live on bugs. The crackpot ideas are everywhere you look. This bespeaks people who have too much time on their hands. I think probably a good part of that is the availability of free time and money and things to get into trouble with. But that can only go on so long. It's either going to resolve, there are ways it can resolve itself. It can reach the point where it's so chaotic that people want a dictator to come in to put order into things. Like I say, there's what do you call a country that, on the one hand, went from a period of enormous prosperity and traded this off for a decrepit old man whose mental faculties are, let's be kind and say substandard, and the economy going sour in every direction, and no problems being solved and no problems being created. This is no way to live. I mean, you can't have that sort of thing going on. But what got into people, I don't know. For some reason, well, I look at Trump, might as well get it out there, as this great trickster figure. He fits the patterns of the trickster, which is a sort of amorphous being that did spooky things to Indians, and they came up with lots of folk tales about a trickster. It was a funny thing. You had this guy who was financially independent of the world. He didn't, which is sort of what a god is. And he makes a big deal out of descending in his airplane into these massive crowds and acting like a trickster. A trickster is noted for being a bit obscene, a bit hypersexual, there are all sorts of aspects of Trump's behavior that evoke images of trickster, and I think that's probably why people just lost it because they didn't know what this was. There was this unpredictable person, who was nonetheless successful, but it was too much. It's just too much for people to take. But like I say, this is a time and where the transitions are going to take place, and they're probably it's unpredictable. You've got the Muslim world virtually occupying Europe. The culture there will be forever altered massively, and in the United States it's a massive change, and it's we're getting that chaos that starts demanding a dictator to take care of it.
So, Dennis, let's start to speak about UFO. Do you continue to think that much of what surrounds the UFO phenomena is a product of the imagination?
Well, what is the UFO phenomenon? Jung's the title of Jung's essay on this subject was, I think, a myth of things seen in the sky. That's pretty minimal. I've been looking at that since I was a teenager. Just curious. Everybody was curious. I don't think anybody got too cranked up about UFOs. The military was concerned that they might be a threat, but when the military, time after time, there were UFOs spotted around military installations, and there was never any damage done or never any problems. So the pursuit of UFOs and what they are just sort of quit. There are two, I always have to start by saying there are kind of two schools of UFOs. One is the people who think that these are vehicles that have been constructed by superior intelligences that fly around in sections of the universe and visit Earth once in a while to do adolescent acrobats and tricks on people. And the other school that thinks, well, there might be something there. I personally believe that, yeah, there is something there, but we're constricted by our cultural backgrounds and our perceptions, and we tend to technologize everything. For instance, in the medieval times, people would, there are illustrations of things up in the sky zooming around, but they're in the shapes of things that are familiar to people on the ground, so to speak. For one period of time, they're angels, and for another, they're super intellectual aliens. And there's a lot of the reports of contact you look at, and you see that they're put together from science fiction, folklore, bits and pieces of all sorts of things show up. Now, I never had an experience. I mean, I never saw what I would call a UFO, and I certainly wasn't abducted. But I've met a number of abductees. And you know, they all get probed and prodded, and there's experiments and all of these things done on them, but they're kind of unimpressive, and you can't take these entities seriously because they don't do anything serious. But like I said, something else is going on now. I have the idea. Close encounters of the third kind actually has impressed me as much as any UFO movie ever has, because whatever the UFO is seems to create an atmosphere. In other words, there's not only the UFOs themselves and the aliens and their location in space or parked somewhere, but an aura, if you will, that spreads out across the landscape. And you see the hero of the movie, for instance, driven to make a model of the Devil's Tower. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's working with mashed potatoes, and he's spending hours and hours and hours, and he ends up with this Devil's Tower. I believe, I don't know how this it could be done, I suppose, if you had a case where there's a lot of sightings, a lot of activity, and collected the dreams of people, and looked at other things that happened they do with animals and with whatever. And I think that let's put this way, in the region, however big it is, a psychic atmosphere is created. It's just an atmosphere, and we pick up on it in our minds, and we may see the objects, we may just dream of them. I've had, a couple of interesting dreams about UFOs. I might as well say, because they're just kind of funny. One of them was in Montana. I go out, we had a little shelter for the car, I don't know what you call that. And there's a UFO parked in that area. And it's sort of a Donald Duck UFO with an alien in it, And I get hugely excited, and I say to the alien, who speaks English, of course, well, can you take me back to Minneapolis? I want to show this to my buds. And, I've got it nailed. I've got the thing nailed here. And the alien looks at me and he says, well, this thing only goes like 15 miles an hour. So it's going to, I don't know if you want to do that. Okay, that's the whole dream. The second dream, I'm out in some empty area of Montana, and a spaceship lands with all the fuss and smoke and flame and all that. And I cower, I throw myself in the ditch, and God knows what's going to happen to me. And finally things settle down, and I look up, and this very statuesque, blonde, Venusian woman is coming down the ramp from the rock, just like the comic books, And she says, comes up to me and hands me this book and says, here are the secrets of the universe in this book. Well, hey, I can hardly wait to dive into that. And then she goes back and off. And start paging through this book. And it's basic algebra. So the dreams here are telling me, going at this from a hardware standpoint is not it. There's no energy in it. There's no reality in it. You're not going to get anywhere with it. You might as well be looking at a 8th grade algebra book for all you're going to ever know about UFOs. And if you do find out that it isn't going to amount to enough to get you back to town. Anyway, those actually really turned me, I stopped going up to the mountaintops, and which I did. I would drive up these logging roads way up in the Bitterroot Mountains, and you could see, if there was a UFO in 1,000 square miles, you'd see it. You could see everything. And I never saw anything. Never. And they wouldn't visit me. I mean, I sent them psychic messages like, come on, yeah, that was, there was another, there was a UFO thing that was not quite so comical. Every year they have a convention of sorts at Giant Rock Airport in California, which is out in the middle of nothing. And I think, I shouldn't say middle of nothing, there's kind of a colony of weirdos out in that area, scattered buildings that they live in and come out by night. And there was this guy who had created these gigantic electrostatic generators. I have pictures of them someplace. And he kept putting the touch on little old ladies in Pasadena for cash to keep this thing going, which could never finish it. But he had 3 of these big shiny domes there. But anyway, I went to visit him and talk to him and so forth. And this meeting was going on, this little convention of UFO buffs. And I was in the middle of the desert with my brother. And there was a airport restaurant. Half a mile, 3/4 of a mile up this dirt road. So he said, we go up there, get a drink, whatever. We drive up to it, and there's one other car. And there's nothing else. No other cars around. Ours and this other one. And we open the door and go into this restaurant, and it's wall-to-wall people. I mean, there must have been 300 people in a restaurant. I don't know, size of the floor plan of this house, maybe. And where did they come from, and how did they get there? And we were instantly made to feel like we better get out of there. They did not want us there at all. That's the only kind of UFO experience I ever had that was a little bit creepy. Going back to the research side, there were a couple of points that I really want to emphasize, and one is its relationship to psychic phenomena. If you look at, for instance, traditional seance room events, and compare them to UFOs and the phenomena associated with them, they're very much the same. You can draw very close parallels between the two. I say there's a couple of essays on this subject which escape me at the moment, but they're certainly worth reading. I'm trying to get your footnote on that. And the other is the tricksterish nature of them. There have been several theories of UFOs. There was a straight line theory. There was and these theories actually work for a while, and then they don't. And this points to it's what's been called the deconstructive aspect of the UFO phenomenon. You might look at trickster or the UFO phenomenon itself as a process of deconstructing our ideas of reality and kind of reshuffling the way we see things. Now, those things are interesting, and I think what I see now with this new interest in UFOs, the military is taking out their films and so forth, and I've looked at a bunch of them, and they're always blurry. The only time they weren't blurry was there's a Swiss guy who faked UFO photos, and those are really slick. Those are impressive. But for some reason, the run-of-the-mill photographs never turn out. It's same thing. It's the same thing, and you have a different generation, so people get excited about it. But fine. There's worse things you can do with your time. I just watch the movies. The movies on flying saucers are much more interesting, and probably have as much information in them as you're going to get. The imaginations of the people who put those films together, I think, sometimes cross over into other dimensions, which of course is another hypothesis for the UFOs, that they don't come from another galaxy, which is just not likely. They're from another dimension, 3.5 space or something, maybe. Maybe their vibratory rate that fluctuates and becomes visible occasionally in our space. Maybe they're messengers from the futures. I think who was it? Timothy Leary. I think he said that they're our own selves visiting us from the future, which I suppose you can get there on the amount of acid he dropped. It's fun. Another person that it was a friend of mine. He died young, relatively young. Terrence McKenna. He lived across the island from the big island in Hawaii, and he did a series of audio tapes called True Hallucinations, and talks a lot about UFOs there. I think maybe to really get the full flavor of those tapes, you probably have to take some kind of psychedelic yourself, because they're very, very strange. But, he had a thing, plants were beings that could communicate with.
So, Mr. Stevens, mythology, folklore, distorted realities, an ancient trio that is still very current today also. There's not anything new in the ufology, really.
No, and there's many things that are interrelated. I mean, it's a whole web. I could go on and on. You have like Peter Rochevitz and the Men in Black. That's another aspect. There's some very creepy stuff, and it doesn't, when you get into the really creepy stuff, it doesn't take a whole lot for you to kind of start thinking about imps and demons and trolls and various other kind of humanoid pestilences that intrude on our world. I've seen things that had a dark aspect to them, and under the right circumstances, the right atmosphere. It's like here we are in North Dakota on a bright sunny day. There aren't going to be any spooks around, and it's the year of our Lord. What is it, 2021, and we all know everything and so forth, and we've chased all the little boogeymen away, supposedly, but they haven't gone away, and I'm quite sure they inhabit some people. I see some of the characters running around loose in the streets and in public and in the universities, and there's something that's got into these people that isn't quite human. Otherwise, they just. Well, I guess we were talking about polarization and why things are tense. It's been said, I forget who in the exact quote, but I believe it anyway, that the big problem of this century is going to be the problem of good and evil. And evil is going to take on a reality that it never had before, or was kept at bay. It's you see, for instance, on the extreme left, politically, very much like a channeling of evil, just flat out, against which the light people have apparently no defense. People have no imagination for evil, or very few do. They think that it's proper instruction and a suitable environment will get rid of the bad stuff. But that'll be the battle, and where it's going to go, I don't know. I just don't. I follow it pretty closely, and something's got to crack pretty soon in this country, anyway, because it's getting a little bit too nuts. I'm surprised there isn't more. Well, I shouldn't say anything because I'm not into it. I'm isolated in North Dakota. For all I know, there's swarms of UFOs running around the rest of the country. But I would be actually interested in knowing if that's the case. Are we getting any uptick in UFO sightings? This friend of mine, the chicken farmer in Indiana, had a theory that I don't know, it's a UFO theory and they're short-lived, but he had a theory that the number of sightings increased in times of national disgrace or national depression or embarrassment, things like that. I kind of thought that wasn't bad. I checked it against some of the historical material I knew about, and yeah, you could say that there was a pattern there. How persistent it is, I don't know. There have been other patterns that have looked really, really great, and they disappear.
So Dennis, sorry, I agree a lot with what your friends say, because if you see with the COVID-19, when the lockdown, a lot of people closed in house, a very big depression of the people, and the number of the sightings grow and grow and grow in this period of time, isn't it? Here in the USA also?
I don't know.
You don't know. In Europe, the time of the lockdown, the sightings was increased by 300%.
Very interesting. Yeah. Yeah. That would be one theory that stood up.
So, Dennis, in your book, you speak or you write about a lot of things, but one of the most interesting for me is the physiological factor, which some experimenters claim to receive an extrasensory communication that gives them a message. Has this any explanation? Are the UFOs or extraterrestrial beings really give to people extrasensory communications, or this is the fruit of their own imagination?
Well, right off the top, I'd say it's the fruit of their imaginations, because all of the messages I've ever seen, there may be exceptions, all of them I've ever seen from aliens to humans have been stupid. The platitudes. They're be good and love one another. Don't use nuclear weapons. Insights like that. No.
So, we can say, Dennis, according the ethnicity and social level of the experimenter, the story varies. Can we say that these people are influenced by folklore, for example, or popular beliefs?
I'm going to have to hear that again.
According to the ethnicity of the people, if I'm black or I'm white or I'm Indian, the story of a contactee varies. If I'm black, the story takes a way. If I'm white, the story takes another way. If I'm Indian, the story takes another way. Can we say that different experimenters are influenced by their own folklore or their own legends or popular beliefs?
Oh yeah, their observations and the way you see things is everybody. I mean, you can go further and say every single person is going to give a different flavor to their observations due to their past experience and their intelligence and their observation skill, all of those things. That's why, you know, you have the issue of multiple witnesses. Now, multiple witnesses of UFO things is of course more interesting because you apparently have actual witnesses.
So then the mind of the human being is very powerful. We come back to the fall of 1967. You were absolutely alone in Montana, in middle of a snowy desert, when suddenly you heard a voice calling out to you. There was absolutely no one in this snowy desert. How powerful is the human mind?
Well, now this is one of the more interesting things that happened to me because like it says, I was out in the middle. If something would have happened, if I had an accident, there's no possibility I would have survived and probably wouldn't even have been found for several months at least. But anyway, it was, everything was acoustically dead. You could hear crunching in the snow with your feet. You just could hear crunch, crunch. But you also had the wind going through the pine needles.
So, sorry, Dennis, I read you heard. I read in your book. It was so acoustically dead. Then you was listening to your heart beatings.
Yeah. Everything you could just hear it, but there was this constant wind that went through the pine needles and the trees. There was sort of a white sound, like that. Now, I didn't know what that was. I mean, I heard my name called, and and I said, "What?" Just automatically. And of course, nobody there. And I wondered about that for a very long time. And then funny things happened. I went to a book dealer in Maryland that I occasionally bought rare books from. And they say, well, we got more books out there in the shed, and I'm out there and I'm going through. And there's this unbound kind of yellow paper covered thing in German. I wasn't looking really for anything in German, but this book's in German. And I, for no good reason, normally wouldn't do this. I just looked at it and I saw, what's the title of this book? The chances that it would be something I wanted were nearly zero. But I looked in there anyway. And I don't remember the exact title of it. The title was in German, but it was something like, "On hearing your name being called when you're out alone in the woods." and this monograph of about 40 pages or whatever on what this was. What it is, I think the best explanation I've seen is you can get into a space, an environment, an ambiance that of a certain nature that your self begins to disintegrate. And what happens is the self calls your name. Dennis, like, don't go there. Snap out of it. In other words, it's the self reintegrating itself, so that you've got it together, as they say. But it was startling at the time.
So we continue in 3, 2, 1. Dennis, a good friend of yours, Hilary Evans, spoke to us many years ago of a distortion of reality by the experimenter, do it by our X agent. Does this hypothesis still apply today? That's an X agent are interceding in the experimenters of the UFO phenomena? Electromagnetic, for example,
yeah.
Wi-Fi's, Bluetooth.
Yeah, I don't know. They're searching for something. The experimental effects. Now, if I understand this correctly, there's what they call Hecate sciences. If you're familiar with Hecate, she was the Greek witch. Anyway, the Hecate sciences are sciences like ufology, like parapsychology, like you can include even astrology, you can include all of that kind of stuff. Mantic sciences, they sometimes call them. And to one degree or another, they're very susceptible to this thing we talked about earlier of giving you good results, giving you exactly the results you want, and then pulling the rug out from under you when you think you've got it nailed. There are bad tricks involved in these things. The late friend of mine, Jack Houck, used to do a lot of this psychic metal bending and other things. He had a principle. He was very sharp. He had a principle. He said, these things will, if you give these like psychic things or UFOs, I suppose, anything like that, a problem to solve, if you dare them to do something, or give them a problem to solve, or anything like that. They'll solve the problem in the least difficult way. Now, the least difficult way of solving a problem might be to cheat. So dishonesty is built into the study of anomalous phenomena. You could say it's actually built into it, which makes perfect sense because this is what trickster is. Trickster's a liar, a cheat, all of these things. And a healthy thing, I think, is to, enjoy it, but don't put any money on that number because you're going to lose. You're going to lose right at the moment when you got all the money you want. That's the best they'll ever get. These things are elusive. That's one of their properties. Their elusivity, and so they're never going to be finally pinned down. If they could be, it could be a very, very bad problem. There was a big discussion: is parapsychology or the psychic powers, are these something that we, in ancient times, we had more of, and then we've lost it over time? Or are we gradually gaining psychic powers and it's never been there? And I've kind of said that, I think probably originally in the whatever soup we all lived in, we had psychic powers all over the place, but you can't live that way. So, evolutionarily speaking, it had to be scrubbed out. You wouldn't want to be able to read everyone's mind.
So Dennis, now you are working in a personal project. You are writing your biography.
I've been getting a lot of help from Kristen Towson down in Minneapolis, and the letters. I was kind of hoping I would have gotten further into the letters before you got here, but the week before this one, I was in the hospital, for one thing, and other things. So I didn't, but I've got I got several hundred of them done, and I just got bite the bullet. Okay, wait till the snow falls, and I absolutely can't do anything. I mean, it could get brutal up here. We had period 20, what was that, 2009, 10, and 11. Those 3 years. It's just everything snowed like this. Every day going out to the car was a battle. Getting the car cleaned off was took half the afternoon if you could get it out. Then if you got it out, then the roads weren't plowed. that gets a little tiresome after a while. Then you get the flood in the spring. We get monster floods down here. You see that wall out there. The water comes up to that wall.
Oh. That wall of the
Yeah.
There's a river there.
The river's on the other side. And it'll come right up to the top of that.
Because of rain.
Yeah. And that's about probably 12 feet, 14 feet. And it's just
Oh, it comes here.
just deadly to look at. In fact, they've, in the last 2 years, the last 2 or 3, they've just torn out all these houses here. There are dozens and dozens of houses that have been torn down and moved out, and they've created these basically no-go zones where you can't build anything, and they've put up in certain strategic areas, they've got these high reinforced walls that can be actually expanded. It gets pretty interesting. I told my wife the flood in, I think it was 2011. I came home and I'd been over there and looked at it. And I said, you got to go over and look at the river. And she went over there. She came back and her eyes were about this big around. Because you get over there and you look and you think you're going to be looking down at the river. And no, the river's at eye level, and it's like and it looks like the Mississippi. I mean, it's, that whole park is covered.
So, Dennis, thanks a lot for this interview. For me, it was a big honor. I'm very honored by giving your time to me and to receive us in your home. We are very grateful with you, and I have no words personally to say how hospitality was with us, and thank you again for receiving us from Andorra, and thanks a lot for receiving us in your house.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Had a good time. You don't get much excitement from up here, and I can't really remember the last time people from Andorra visited.
You cannot remember here in your house. I'm sure you can remember it. That's a very good job, yeah. I think you have a great sense of humor, yeah, for sure. You're very, very cool in this sense. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been fun. It's huge fun. See, will I ever get over to Andorra? Probably not. But yeah, how far is Lourdes from there? That's only over the mountains there, isn't it? So,
anyway, if you come to Andorra, here you have your home, and you will be very welcome.
thank you.